Alright, YouTube and 4chan, by the way. The meme battle is over, but the meme wars have just begun. They're not over yet. We have successfully, through use of the internet, through use of memetics and propaganda, literally, in some of these states, almost certainly, we have memed Donald Trump into the presidency. The down ballot has been a lot kinder to Republicans than expected. I'm ambivalent. I don't care. Honestly, I was hoping McCain would lose his spot because he's a retard. But at the same time, this doesn't mean the end of the popular resistance against globalism, against cronyism, the neocons and neolibs that have strangulated things for so long. You got to realize the House and Senate are still controlled collectively by neocons and neoliberals. It'll take a couple of years, hopefully, of steady growth to kick them out, get rid of most of the incumbents that are in power. Then and only then can we actually retain our country. Otherwise, we've got an executive branch that has to at least make some negotiations with people who are completely opposite what the will of the population is. And this involves even a lot of Democrats. We can't be too hard on them. You've got to understand the Bernie Sanders movement and so forth was another backlash against globalism. If you actually sort of look at what people were saying, deeply anti-war, not particularly in favor of government censorship, except that perhaps of the alt-right or something like that. Ultimately, it's really a bit closer to the anti-globalist forces you see rising around the world. It's gotten to the strange point where you've got skinheads supposedly on the far right and a bunch of communists that fundamentally agree on the topic of globalism for different reasons. The nationalist would say it's destroying our culture. The communist would say it's destroying some third world state. We don't care about our culture, but it's destroying, I guess, the brown people over in Africa or something, and that's what they would fixate on. And that's both true. They're both right. The far right and the far left are both now against globalism for good reason. You're going to see, in some ways, I think, a uniting of these forces along that line if it retains dominance as the main argument. Everything else that you've seen in this election has been an anti-globalist backlash, by the way. The reform of the tax code is specifically, we want more homegrown businesses. We're tired of losing manufacturing overseas. That's number one. With trade deals, it's self-explanatory. These are globalist, interventionist trade deals. They have nothing to do with free trade. One of the big things that fucked Gary Johnson, I don't think he's above 5% in more than 2 or 3 states right now, is the fact that he waffled back and forth on the TPP 3 times. That's one reason I wouldn't vote for him. When it became clear he didn't know what he was talking about on that, I abandoned him the day before his Aleppo comments. It's actually funny, and you can go back and see the day that I did that. I didn't need to wait for him to not know about anything about the Syrian crisis to know that he was a failed candidate. And I apologize to the libertarians out there who did, stick with Johnson. I think you're partisans with party loyalty to the LP more than you are ideological libertarians, because Gary Johnson is certainly not a libertarian, which is why he failed. If you'd had someone with more principles, they probably would have carried above 5% in all the states. They could have gotten upwards of 10. They could have capitalized upon a lot of people who really didn't care about Trump or Clinton. They could have done that a lot more easily, but he melted into the background with several months to go into the election and slowly lost steam from there. I would say memetics is an effective way to change people's minds. It's more than just cartoon frogs and things of that nature. But that is an effective way to spread things. If it's spreading on one of these sites, like 4chan, Reddit, or whatever, it has a tendency to go far beyond that if it's become popular enough. It starts spreading out elsewhere. Personifying Trump ideology as a more or less innocuous cartoon frog tied in with occultism is a great way to make it a more millennial-friendly label. I think ultimately that swung the election. When you're looking at the margin that you're seeing in states like Pennsylvania, in states like Florida, an abnormally high support of youth voters for Trump is giving him these states. It was the millennial generation that just saved America. It wasn't the older generations coming out in unexpected numbers. It wasn't the boomers. It was the millennials. The Republican Party has consistently polled well behind the Democrats in this voting bloc. That's not happening this election. They're still behind, but by a much smaller margin. Younger voters have successfully swung about half a dozen states in Trump's direction. all told. That was partially due to memetics. Partially, not fully. Part of it was grassroots activism, but Trump never had as much on the ground as Clinton did anyway, so I tend to discount that. It's probably about 75% of Trump's increased support in these states among the younger voters probably came from people posting cartoon frogs, above all else. That's why he won. The meme wars have just barely begun. We've struck the first blow against globalism, but we've got a lot more work to do. There are many other countries that have to be liberated. The UK now is still on the ropes as to whether they're even having a Brexit. They're having problems. The results of the U.S. election probably will be helpful. We see rising anti-globalist sentiment in Africa, too. I'd point out the Chinese are treating them like a colonial asset, and people there are getting pissed off. I've heard firsthand from people from Africa, East Africa especially. They're very, very tired of the Chinese being there. You've got anti-Chinese parties. It's a single platform sort of party. It roughly equates to like UKIP or something like that, or the rising populism of the United States based on manufacturing and trade deals. It looks all the same. It's rising up across the entire world at the same time. It's happening in Sweden. It's happening in France. It's starting to happen in Germany. Merkel's already basically on her last gasp of support. It's happening everywhere. If the world rejects globalism, we can work together in a voluntary manner as opposed to a corrupt globalized manner, and things will be better off. But it will take us years to accomplish this. We've got a lot more work to do. Pepe's army, spoken of by Salon yesterday as though it was nothing more than a joke, rose up and defeated Hillary Clinton. And Pepe's army will go on into other countries, which they will take a harder line. Now that the United States has tilted away from globalism, a lot of these people are going to get a lot more nasty in the countries that they still maintain. You can expect heavy censorship, possibly violence in some of these countries run by these multinational corporations and international banks. You can expect them to try to use the internet at times to crack down on things. They'll try to censor the internet. They're going to try to make a play for controlling the internet. But the United States being the hegemon of the internet, it's no longer clear they're going to be able to do that in more than a slipshod manner, which is going to help us liberate, hopefully, a host of European and African nations in the next couple of years, as well as states within Latin America. We need to get rid of Maduro in Venezuela at some point. Memetics can make that happen a lot better than military involvement. We can destroy Maduro. We can destroy the Putinists if we want to. Memetics, and those that are in control of it, those that understand it fully, that have a understanding of propaganda as it relates to social media, have the ability right now, technically, to take over the world. The good thing about this is that primarily it appears that we're trying to take it over to free people from tyranny, to install a global order that is voluntary, that respects human rights, that respects civil rights, that respects the right of free information, especially in a digital manner. That's a good thing. We can't allow our ranks to be perverted by a bunch of authoritarians, number one. Populism's not authoritarianism. It's just we want to be guarded against these global forces that are corrupt and don't have any national loyalty or anything like that. That's fine. Cultural nationalism is great if it's tempered by that ethos. And number two, we can't let off the gas. We have to keep plowing forward. France is probably next. Front National needs our help. The so-called nationalists, which are kind of wishy-washy in Germany, need our help. The libertarians in Brazil need our help. All of these different groups are going to need outside aid. A lot of the people influencing the U.S. election weren't from the U.S. I'm not talking about, Putin influencing WikiLeaks. No, I'm talking about a bunch of people shitposting online. They're changing minds by completely overwhelming CTR and similar groups that would have prevailed if that weren't happening. 4 years ago, there weren't enough people on the internet from the international community on a lot of these sites to really push things in one direction or the other. Now there are. And it's going to get more and more virulent. My call, going out to my fans and all of these sites, is keep fighting, tooth and nail. Shitpost all day and then try to get some sleep when the Red Bull wears off, I suppose. Because we're doing great things. This was a meme election, in part. There's a pretty good chance that the deciding votes in some of these very close states were decided because a bunch of basement-dwelling millennials decided to go with smug Pepe, essentially. And that's not an exaggeration. When you're talking about a margin of 100,000 votes, that's not a lot of people, honestly, for a state that sometimes has a population of several tens of millions. And that could happen in Europe as well. Europe will see the next round, hopefully, of defeats for the globalists, defeats for the international moneyed interests that for so long have ground down the world population. So let's just get rid of them. We'd exile them all to Madagascar and close their port so they couldn't escape, because that's the way it works. But I think the people of Madagascar wouldn't want them there. Maybe we'll have to find some small deserted island. Maybe the one that Amelia Earhart probably died on. We'll just put them all there and let them starve to death. That's about all. Peace out.